if former President Trump's tax proposals become reality, would it shift the USA to a more consumption-based tax system, or at least away from a system that is built mostly on taxing income? And what could the impact be on Americans and the economy? Joining us now to discuss is Brendan Duke, the Senior Director of Economic Policy at the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Casey Mulligan, Professor of Economics at the University of Chicago. Casey Mulligan, let me begin with you. Let's talk about tariffs and their power to generate income or revenue for the federal coffers here. How much could those tariffs add, and who pays tariffs? Do foreign countries, foreign companies, and foreign individuals pay the tariffs, or do Americans pay the tariffs? Casey?
On the revenue question, we have, a lot of what we buy in America is from America, regardless of whether we have tariffs. So there's a limited amount of our spending out there that can be tariffed. And some of the rates that I've heard people talk about, I'm not sure where that's coming from. In the Republican platform that President Trump presented in Milwaukee and was adopted by the RNC refers to baseline tariffs. I don't expect those to be all that large, although it's a whole Republican operation. So a Republican Congress and House would have to decide what they mean by baseline tariffs and how much.
Brendan, let's talk about the idea that part of what may be afoot here, as President Trump has moved away in his proposals to exempt overtime, tips, and Social Security income from taxes. Is he moving away from a reliance on the income tax as the principal way the federal government is funded, and in any sense toward a consumption tax?
Yeah, sure. So as you guys said, he's proposed about $10 trillion of tax cuts, basically all on the income tax side. So that reduces our reliance on income taxes, which the wealthy disproportionately pay. On the other hand, he has pitched 10 to 20% tariffs on every imported good entering the United States, which is a consumption tax. In some sense, as Vice President Harris has said, works in effect like a national sales tax. So that's raising our reliance on consumption taxes, which low and middle income families are going to pay more of than they do income taxes. So it's a shift of our revenue mix from income taxes to consumption taxes. And in that way, there's actually some similarities to traditional Republican ideas, of shifting our reliance to a sales tax or a VAT, but in kind of a weird way, and actually a way that could actually really harm economic growth.
Casey, I saw you shaking your head there. Do you not see it that way?
No, the tariffs are not a consumption tax. It's also an investment tax. I mean, we import, aside from residential investment, pretty much all other kinds of investment. We're importing a fair chunk of that. I mean, as I said before, most things we buy as American, whether it be consumption or investment, but the mix of imports between consumption and investment is like the rest of the economy. So I would view it more like some kind of expenditure tax, or even somewhat like an income tax, although not the progressive element of it.
Somewhat like an income tax. So where, Casey, in other words, is all the revenue going to come from? I mean, are tariffs of 10% or whatever number put out there enough to supplement or replace the changes or the income that would be lost on a traditional income tax?
Well, I don't think there's a plan to have huge cuts in the income tax. The SALT part, I don't know how that got out there. There are people in Trump's orbit from California, like Navarro and Mnuchin, who want SALT back, of course. But President Trump had dealt with that debate many times in his administration, and he's always siding on this side of keeping the SALT out. And, it's a giveaway to blue states. And I don't see how we could possibly expect President Trump and a Republican House and Republican Senate to bring the SALT back and have that giveaway.
But I think he said it last week in a rally in Uniondale on Long Island. He basically said he was in favor or would fight to get that SALT deduction back into the tax code.
No, I don't expect that to happen for the reasons I mentioned.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that probably isn't going to happen. There's probably a lot that isn't going to happen because people are throwing around lots of promises. Brendan, let's talk about the idea of pivoting toward a consumption-based tax. I mean, I've often thought that one of the flaws in our tax system is that different kinds of income are taxed different ways and at different rates. and that is a distortion. It causes people to seek out income to get paid in ways that produce the lowest tax rate. If you went to a consumption tax, is that a more efficient, not necessarily progressive, but a more efficient way to bring in revenue?
Look, I think the key thing is that a consumption tax, given the U.S. Congress, given, President Trump, is likely to have just as many holes in it as the income tax. I mean, you can't take the politics out of politics.
In other words, it would have loopholes. You would have certain kinds of expenditures that wouldn't, or a VAT, which most countries have. Most countries have a VAT.
Sure, but different rates on different types of goods, right? So again, you can't take the politics out of politics. Certainly there would be loopholes.
Well, I guess what I'm driving at is a VAT a more efficient way to raise and collect revenue for the federal government than an income tax is?
I mean, again, a VAT you made up without Congress putting in exemptions is, one category that I think is not realistic. But on another level, I think the key thing is when you look at the studies behind, what moving to a consumption tax and replacing the income tax with it would do, you get some increase in GDP, but most families are worse off because they're paying more in taxes, right? So, on the one hand, on the other hand. So I think that's the key thing to me, in my opinion, is that just middle income families would be worse off because they're paying more in taxes. The wage increase isn't good enough to offset that increase in taxes.